According to the American College of Sports Medicine, the strength training guidelines are as so. Exercise 2 to 3 times per week for each muscle group. Perform a different exercise for the muscle group every 2 to 3 sessions, so don't get in the same routine. Make sure you mix it up a little bit. Perform a minimum of 1 set per major muscle group. Now, most of the time you're going to see people do 3 sets of 10, for example, or 3 sets of 12, which goes on to the range we talk about here. Complete 8 to 12 repetitions per set. My opinion is that usually, 1 set might be, you got to talk about a very low-level person. You're going to obviously do 1 set per major muscle. But really, because of trying to train the nerves to get used to that pattern, you're going to need to do 2 to 3 sets a lot of times to get that nerve function out, which is why it's important to go light and don't fatigue them so much. At least 1 set to near fatigue should be completed during each session. So exactly, you don't want to get where the first set, they're completely toast. You want to almost train them below what you think they're capable of because it's all about form. Use the concentric, eccentric muscular contractions during exercise, which if you're going through a full range of motion, that's going to be a given. A 3-second concentric contraction and a 3-second eccentric contraction in a controlled manner. Now, obviously, depending on what the person is trying to achieve, this is a general rule of thumb, okay? The main thing to understand is that you want to be slow and controlled and think tension on the muscle over time. And especially if you notice 3 seconds on the eccentric, really control it slowly on the negative portion of the movement. That is when the muscle is lengthening. That is when you see injuries occur, when the muscle is lengthening. If you take a rubber band and you pull it too far apart, that is where the chance of breaking is going to occur. Now we're going to talk about program design for muscular strength and endurance. There's different types of things to consider when you're doing a program design. First and foremost, for liability's sake, you need to have some kind of health screening. You're going to typically have them fill out a PAR-Q, or a physical activity readiness questionnaire. Very, very important that you sit down with your client. Many people come to fitness facilities very, very apprehensive. They are physically not in shape. They are mentally a little scared. Intimidated is a good word. And they're just really apprehensive and have some anxiety about it, maybe even. There's been people that might have thought about it for 6 months. There have been people that might have thought about it for 6 years. So to sit down with them and understand what their goals are, what your goals are for them, and that you can meet somewhere in the middle so they don't have unrealistic expectations, for example. But also, we want to make sure that you thoroughly go over their health history. They might say, oh, I'm fine. Well, what does that mean? Well, except for I had a minor heart attack a few years ago, or except for I had this, I have a fake knee, but other than that, I'm fine. Well, we need to know all that, so make sure they fill that out. Give them an opportunity to talk, in other words. Don't just run right into the program and ask them as you're walking them around the gym. Sit down in front of them at your desk. Fitness testing. A lot of times you want to take them through a very basic test. You want to kind of find out where they are at, what their parameters are. Are they ready to jump into a more advanced program? Are they ready to start off on the elliptical versus maybe they just need to be walking on the treadmill because everybody knows how to walk and that's a natural movement. So that would be a natural continuation to start them on the treadmill as opposed to the elliptical, which is an unfamiliar movement for most people who are out of shape. Prescription design. You need to think about prescribing them an appropriate program. If they are a person who has already been working out and they're coming to you to go to the next level, find that out. If they're a person who has not done anything ever, or even if they haven't done anything for a year or two, even 6 months, even if they say to you, I was doing this, I was doing that, they might have been doing that a year or two ago or even 6 months ago. That doesn't mean that they need to do it now, at least for the first few weeks. So you might use your judgment to say, well, they've been at a higher level before, but they aren't there right now. That being said, they're probably going to get to that higher level again much quicker than a person who's never been there in the first place. And we refer to that statement as what we call muscle memory. Your muscles kind of remember they've been at this fitness level, and it's kind of like you're waking them back up, and you're more likely to it's kind of like imagine if level of intensity was like a balloon, that had already been filled up with water, and then you let the water back out. Well, the next time you fill it up, it'll fill it up a lot quicker and not have to stretch as hard because it's kind of already been there before. Order of exercises. The asterisks will indicate things that we have very specific things we're going to go over here in a minute. But order of exercises, we'll go ahead and just flip to that real quick. You got large muscle groups before smaller muscle groups. You don't want to work your biceps, in other words, before you do pull-ups. Because our prime mover in a lat pull down or a pull up or a row in your pulling motions is going to be your latissimus dorsi. Our assister is our biceps. So we don't want to pre-fatigue our biceps where we can't get as much out of the main movement. So we want to use our, probably going to hit your muscles of your torso first, then go to your appendages, like your biceps and triceps. Compound exercises before single joint exercises. You'll see a lot of guys, they like to do the chest flies and the really specific movements. Well, a bench press or a dumbbell bench press or a push-up or somewhat kind of compound movement where it works a lot of muscles at the same time, as opposed to an isolation movement like a cable crossover where you're isolating the pectoralis major and not using any triceps. We want to kind of get more bang for our buck when we're looking at that. You want to probably alternate push-pull exercises for a total body workout. You don't want to go and just do one side or the other. A lot of times people like to work the front of their body because that's what they see. Guys notoriously like to work their chest, their biceps, and their abs. We kind of like to call that the California workout, if you will. It's all the muscles you see in the mirror. But it's important to balance out the joint to work all the different antagonistic muscles as well. You want to alternate upper or lower body exercises for total body workout as well. That's another thing to think about. Explosive power exercises before basic strength and single joint exercise. Okay, if you've got an athlete training, for specifically power and all that, they recommend focusing on those before. That can be up for interpretation depending on the level of the athlete and what they're trying to achieve. Exercise for weak areas before exercise for strong areas. You always want to try to think about the philosophy of that you're only as strong as your weakest link. So if a person has a very, very poor core, or they've got a significantly weaker knee, we need to prioritize that. If you've got a person who has a very weak side, like if they've had an injury and something like that and they're out of balance, then we need to consider that as well. You want to work from high intensity to low intensity as you kind of cool down, but you really need to build up to high. So I would say you'd go low to high, then high back down to low. Frequency of exercise, we kind of talked about that earlier. Resistance and repetitions. You need to adjust accordingly. Do not get overzealous, but generally speaking, you're going to raise the resistance, you're going to lower the repetitions. That's kind of a good sequence. We call that, maybe a pyramid set where you're kind of pyramiding the weight up. Total number of sets is going to go along with the principle of volume we've talked about before. It's going to vary from individual. You also need to think about how you cross over. For example, if a person is doing a chest exercise, let's say they're doing a dumbbell incline press, but you've also got them doing bar dips for their triceps. Well, that still is going to use their pecs. So in a sense, you've done 6, if you've done 3 sets of each, you've done a total of 6 sets for the chest, even though it wasn't intended directly to be on a chest or your pectoralis major. Those dips still work the chest. You need to think about total volume directly and indirectly. Form and technique. Form and technique, you just basically want to be slow and controlled. You don't want to do things like bouncing the bar off the chest on a bench press, using hip and back extension, create momentum in an arm curl, shoulder press, overly arching the back or bending backwards. You see people like leaning back too much. Those are examples of poor form. You want to tell people we'd rather them do less reps. If they say, let's tell them we want them to do 12, for example. And if the person is getting to 9 and throwing their back into it, you'd rather say, okay, listen, we either need to do 1, not do as many reps, or 2, let's lighten the weight up so we can get 12. But I would always tell clients I'd rather them stop short of the rep range if it means you've got to do it poorly. It's most important. You're liable as a trainer to make sure the person does it correctly. That's part of what they're paying you for, is to be the person who's saying, hey, we need to not do this right now.